Thank you.
Our next speaker in support is Candy Vasquez. Is Ms. Vasquez here? Okay, we will then turn to speakers in opposition, Dr. Kimberly Liebman, and I'll note that the upcoming speakers are 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30.
Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Chair Lago and Commissioners. My name is Dr. Kimberly Liebman. I'm the Director for Prevention and Community Development at the New York Academy of Medicine. The New York Academy of Medicine was founded in 1847 to take on the critical health problems facing New York City at that time. Our mission is to advance solutions that promote the health and well-being of people living in cities. The Academy was appointed to the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee by City Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito to convene community members to develop recommendations for health and aging in the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. The steering committee created a comprehensive neighborhood plan that not only includes recommendations for rezoning, but also key investments to support the health and growth of the existing community. In our role as a member of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee, we conducted a health impact assessment to provide information about the potential health effects of the plan's affordable housing and zoning recommendations. Our HIA, Health Impact Assessment, found that residential displacement posed a threat to the health of the East Harlem community. It concluded that to prevent negative health impacts and promote health equity, implementation of the proposed rezoning should prioritize maintaining existing affordable housing and building new units, as well as preventing displacement of long-term residents and businesses. In our assessment, the public health chapter of the draft environmental impact statement does not address the health impacts of changes to what are commonly known as the broader determinants of health, such as education, employment, discrimination, socioeconomic status, and housing. We know that residential displacement can negatively impact health. Evidence shows that displacement may cause people to accept affordable but inadequate, substandard, and poor quality housing. It can result in the disruption of important social support, as well as increased costs for transportation. We also know that some displaced residents will become homeless, which in and of itself is linked to several negative health outcomes, including increased risk of infectious disease, mental illness, hunger, and that death rates for homeless individuals are several times higher than for the general population. Displacement can also lead, or the threat of displacement can also lead to high levels of stress, which has been linked to chronic diseases, including heart disease, hypertension, and diabetes, all of which are major concerns for the East Harlem community. In conclusion, we find that the draft environmental impact study significantly underestimates the potential negative impacts of the proposed rezoning to the health of the East Harlem community, and therefore there are unidentified needs for mitigating adverse impacts of the proposed actions to the broader determinants of health in East Harlem. As currently proposed, the scale of the city planning rezoning for East Harlem would adversely impact the health and character of this community. The lower density rezoning proposal outlined by the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan achieves a better balance between creating new affordable housing and preserving the existing character of the community. We urge the Department of City Planning and the administration to reduce the zoning density on Park and 3rd Avenues and make commitments to invest in community priorities identified through the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan.
Thank you, Dr. Liebman. Questions for the doctor? Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Maria Pacheco. Great.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Pacheco. I'm a longtime resident of East Harlem. I don't have any written statement or any data to show you. I'm just going to speak from the heart. I've been almost all my life in East Harlem, 70 years, and I've seen the changes. Some are good, but most of them are not, because I don't see the seniors being taken into consideration with the city planning. there's nowhere for us to go. If we want to leave our apartments that are being deteriorating, NYCHA needs funds to repair. Instead of building these beautiful, I would love to have a beautiful apartment next to where I'm living, but I can't afford it. So I have to stay where I am. And if they continue to let these apartments deteriorate, they're just pushing us out. So I asked the city planning to include more funds to repair the existing buildings in NYCHA. And I would love for you to vote no to the city plan so I can stay here. My children can stay here. My daughters can afford them. There's no way for them to go. They can't afford these new apartments. So no written statement, no data, but from the heart, we need more funds because all the cuts that are being done from HUD, all the cuts, it's just making it worse. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pacheco. Our next speaker in opposition is Atun Plummer. Is Mr. Plummer present? Thank you.
So Atom Plummer had to leave for work.
Thank you.
So I'll be reading his statement for him. I'm a lifelong resident of Central Harlem. I'm here because I went to school in East Harlem. I still have friends and family who live here, and I really care about this community. A few years ago, the rezoning of 125th Street was approved. Now the consequence of that has come into fruition. The result? I now walk down streets I grew up on and don't recognize them. My community doesn't feel like home anymore. It's so disheartening to the locations of businesses that were owned by my neighbors replaced by stores I can't afford to shop in and restaurants I can't afford to eat in. I've also lost neighbors throughout the years as the neighborhood has gotten more expensive. These changes were so transparently not for the residents of Harlem. And what Harlem has gone through is modest compared to this proposal. In addition, if the time comes that I cannot afford to live where I am, I wouldn't even have the option of moving a mile south to a familiar community close to where I grew up. I don't want to see the residents of East Harlem suffer a worse fate when there is so much room and need for actual positive change. So please spare them my experience. Vote no on the East Harlem displacement plan. Thank you, Adam Rah Plummer.
Thank you for reading Mr. Plummer's statement. Our next speaker in opposition is Leon Blygen.
Yes, good afternoon. I too am going to speak from the heart. I'm not standing here with any data, but I am a resident of East Harlem. I'm a homeowner in East Harlem. I'm a native New Yorker, grew up on the Lower East Side of New York, lived in East Harlem for the last 25 years, was fortunate to get a 3-family house through an HPD initiative back in 2004. Even though it didn't turn out to be what HPD promised it was going to be, it's still a blessing. Me and my neighbors have had to put a lot of work into preserving these houses and to keep them from falling apart because they were built so poorly. I'm coming to this whole opposition late in the process because I wasn't aware that there was a rezoning that was being scheduled for East Harlem. How I found out about it, there's a parking lot next to my house, an open air parking lot, and they were digging in the parking lot one day, and the building felt like it was about to fall in. They were digging to do exploratory work to see if a 30-story building could be put in this parking lot. And that drew me to this process because then I went to the community board to find out what was happening. And it just baffles me how all of a sudden so much big money is interested in East Harlem. I'm a member of East Harlem when it was blighted. When the commissioner asked the question earlier about materials cost the same regardless. Yes, they do cost the same regardless. But here's the reality. Nobody was interested in East Harlem until recently. Now all the big money is interested in East Harlem, and they're trying to displace the residents. I fully understand now what the Native Americans must have felt like when those ships from Europe landed here and said that they discovered a place that people were already existing. We exist in East Harlem. We've been in East Harlem for generations, and this is about the life of East Harlem. It's about the life and death of East Harlem. And I'm going to tell you something. I can only speak for me. I'm not going to roll over and play dead. And I think a lot of people from the East Harlem community are not going to roll over and play dead. I'm hoping that this planning commission, which I understand is made up of a lot of appointees of the mayor, I don't understand how DCP could come up with a plan totally opposite of what was submitted by the community board or by the steering committees, totally the opposite, which says to me that they're in the pocket of big money, and we have to stand up and fight back. I saw someone shaking their head a few minutes ago like, oh, this guy with his emotion. Guess what? This is emotional. This is about the life and death of our community. And so we have to stand up for our community.
Thank you, Mr. Blodgett. Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Dennis Osono.
Hi, my name is Dennis Asorio, and I'm a member of Community Voices Heard. We were a project partner who's helped spearhead the East Harlem neighborhood plan process alongside the Speaker, Borough President, and CB11, and I live on one of the streets that's being targeted for rezoning. Me and 1,500 members of the community have dedicated hundreds of hours to hammer out a shared vision for the future of East Harlem. This resulted in the East Harlem neighborhood plan. Soon afterwards, the city presented its proposal for rezoning that not only ignored this East Harlem neighborhood plan, but insulted the hundreds of hours of work we all put into it. They ended up dividing up the neighborhood into richer and poorer areas. The richer, whiter areas were protected from rezoning, while the poorer areas where families and people of color live are being targeted by it. Not only does this undermine the spirit of mandatory inclusionary housing, which is supposed to ensure that affordable housing is built in areas that have historically kept it out, but it casts a shadow over the very idea of rezoning, which is now seen as something designed to get low-income and working-class people of color out of their homes so that we can be replaced. The density being proposed also breaks with the spirit of the East Harlem neighborhood plan. We fought for a stronger mandatory inclusionary housing program that would create more housing that was truly affordable for East Harlem. And instead, the city's plan would allow for 30-story buildings where 6-story buildings are the norm. This is out of scale, completely inappropriate, and would leave too many of us literally in the shadows of skyscraper buildings that we can't afford and aren't welcome in. In response, CVH members created a platform with a series of demands. These are a neighborhood-wide certificate of no harassment, 30% of all new development to be available at 30% AMI and below, 40% extremely low-income housing and below when public land is involved. That's permanently affordable. $200 million down payment towards a $1 billion need for NYCHA buildings in East Harlem, and 30% local hiring and union opportunities with public land. The East Harlem neighborhood plan expected the city to make commitments before starting ULURP, so we can make informed decisions on whether rezoning would be worth it or not, and to ensure that there would be substantial benefit to the community. This rezoning proposal, however, will not get us what the community needs. What can is the smart use of our public land. We at CVH have gathered over 400 petitions around the use of public land for public good. We could reach higher numbers of permanently affordable units at deeper levels of affordability, do local hiring with living wage jobs, certified apprenticeship opportunities, and first preferences for housing and jobs for local residents. I encourage everybody here from East Harlem to find me and to sign up. The city tells us that there's nothing that they can do about affordable housing but rezone. And we know that is not true. We could downzone. We can actually work together to strengthen rent laws and tenant protections at both the state and city levels. These are the reasons why I encourage you all to vote no on this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asorio. Questions? Okay, we will now turn to speakers in support, starting with Sidney Sherman. Sidney Sherman. Okay, we will then move on to Kim Dargah. We're going through numbers 32, 33, 34, and 35.
Good afternoon, Chair Lago, members of the City Planning Commission. I'm Kim Dargah, Associate Commissioner of the Division of Preservation of the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. I'm testifying in support of the proposed East Harlem rezoning and to share further details on the preservation component of HPD's East Harlem Housing Plan. I understand that questions have been raised about whether the rezoning will result in the displacement of existing residents who have lived in East Harlem for many years and fear that they will no longer be able to afford the neighborhood if it is rezoned. To help address these concerns, I would like to describe the work that HPD has been doing and will do to preserve affordability of the existing housing in the neighborhood. The city defines preservation broadly as preserving the quality, financial feasibility, and affordability of the existing housing stock. We work with owners of properties that are regulated by the city and other governmental entities, as well as those that are unregulated. Since January of 2014, the city has preserved the affordability of 91 buildings with 3,387 residential units in East Harlem, which represents almost 8% of all homes preserved across New York City and about 9% of the non-NYCHA housing stock in East Harlem. These properties provide a range of affordability within the community, with over 70% affordable for low-income residents. HPD's preservation programs provide assistance to owners of privately owned properties, from 1 to 4 unit owner-occupied properties to multifamily properties with varying physical and financial conditions. The city assistance, typically a subsidy loan or property tax exemption, improves property conditions while maintaining affordability. Owners that receive assistance are required to enter into a regulatory agreement that imposes rent and income limitations for the duration of the benefits, typically 30 years or more. While our programs preserve affordability for a range of households, our foremost priority is to preserve the current affordability for current residents. Our preservation programs follow a non-displacement policy for existing residents. Rent and income limitations remain in place for decades so that affordability remains in the community for future residents as well. While owners are required to commit to affordability for the duration of any financial benefit, we aim for the longest possible term of affordability. We have supported the formation and expansion of community land trusts across the city, including in East Harlem, and adjusted how we structure projects to maximize the length of affordability protections. As Commissioner Torres testified, the vast majority of the housing stock in East Harlem is already protected affordable housing regulated by governmental entities. We actively seek to preserve the viability and affordability of this housing. We develop specific programs, including our low-income housing tax credit preservation program and HUD multifamily program, to address the unique characteristics of these properties, and we do proactive and targeted outreach to owners. We also actively work to preserve the affordability of unregulated buildings. We've expanded eligibility in existing finance programs and launched a new green housing preservation program. Outreach
Ms.
and
Dargah,
engagement.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up and submit your written
Okay.
testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Dargah? Our next speaker, thank you. Our next
Thank you.
speaker in support is Jessica Katz.
Good afternoon, Chair Lago, members of the City Planning Commission, and members of the public here with us today. I'm Jessica Katz, Associate Commissioner for New Construction at HPD. I'm here to testify in support of the proposed East Harlem rezoning. Existing residents of East Harlem are finding it increasingly difficult to afford to remain in their homes. While some have expressed concerns that the proposed rezoning may exacerbate the threat of displacement, HPD believes that in fact, the city's East Harlem initiative can help reduce market pressures by enabling an increase in the overall amount of new affordable housing produced in East Harlem. The continued growth of East Harlem has led to a problem of supply and demand in the neighborhood. Due to increased demand for housing over the past decade, rents in East Harlem have risen faster than the citywide average. Too many East Harlem residents are rent burdened, spending more than a third of their incomes to remain in their homes. Unless we can substantially increase the neighborhood's supply of housing overall, these trends will persist unabated. Through Housing New York, HPD has begun to increase the supply of affordable housing in East Harlem and throughout New York City's neighborhoods. Since 2014, the agency has financed or incentivized construction of over 25,000 new affordable homes citywide, a historic high. 844 of these new affordable homes are located in East Harlem. To expand upon this progress, we need to utilize the scarcest resource available, land, in the most effective ways possible. This is why we are prioritizing the use of city-owned sites for the development of new affordable housing. As part of the draft East Harlem Housing Plan, we have already committed to more than 2,400 new affordable homes on East Harlem's public sites, many of which are already underway. Based on feedback from the local community, we continue to explore affordable housing development on additional public sites throughout the neighborhood. As you've already heard, we are also announcing new reforms to our RFP policies, which will make it easier for community groups to compete. Recently, the city has dedicated an additional $1.9 billion to Housing New York so that a greater portion of these homes are affordable to tenants with lower incomes. HPD recently revised our new construction term sheets to better serve those at the lowest income bands as well as formerly homeless households. We also continue to develop senior housing and supportive housing for those with special needs. Despite this progress, HPD cannot adequately respond to the neighborhood's immense need for affordable housing using public land alone. The city must also approve measures that require developers to utilize privately owned land for additional affordable housing production instead of for unregulated market rate housing, which private landowners can currently construct as of right. This is why we are also proposing to implement the new mandatory inclusionary housing program along the avenues within the rezoning areas, so that at least 20 to 30% of any new residential development on private land in these districts will include homes that are permanently affordable at levels much deeper than current asking rents. For example, a new construction 2-bedroom apartment listing on the market today in East Harlem can cost as much as $3,200 per month. MIH option 1, on the other hand, would require developers to rent a comparable 2-bedroom at an average of about $1,200 per month, with some units set aside at even lower rents.
And Ms. Katz, if you could submit the rest of your comments.
Sure.
Would appreciate that. Thank you. Questions for Ms. Katz? Okay, our next speaker in support is Margie Brown.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Margaret Brown, Assistant Commissioner of Policy and Operations at HPD. My division oversees the marketing and lottery process for HPD affordable housing. I'm here in support of the city's East Harlem initiative and to share information about the work we are doing to improve access to affordable housing. Many of these efforts build on the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan and discussions with the community. Over the last several years, HPD has worked with community partners, housing applicants, and design professionals to improve the affordable housing lottery application process, as well as the information and guidance available to applicants. The Housing Ambassadors Program, for example, is a network of community-based organizations who provide free assistance to New Yorkers in applying for affordable housing. They partner with HPD to receive training, distribute informational materials, and relay information back to us about applicants' experiences in applying for affordable housing. We currently have 29 ambassadors, and the network is continually growing. The current ambassadors in East Harlem are the 116th Street Block Association, Wheeling Forward, which serves people with disabilities, East Harlem Council for Community Improvement, and Hope Community. This fall, HPD and the Housing Ambassadors will kick off the second year of Ready to Rent, a financial empowerment program for New York City renters funded by the City Council Speaker's Office. This partnership with the city's Office of Financial Empowerment connects housing seekers to free financial counseling and Housing Ambassador services. Increasing transparency and access to information about the lottery process is a priority for HPD. Our online application system, Housing Connect, and the alternative paper process are available in 7 languages, and our numerous materials about applying for affordable housing, including booklets, information guides, and videos, are available in 17 different languages and in formats accessible to people with disabilities. Earlier this year, we released the first in a series of informational videos for applicants, which gives affordable housing lottery an overview of the affordable housing lottery application process. It already has over 50,000 views. Most importantly, we are working to remove barriers to qualifying for affordable housing. Last fall, we updated the policies and procedures of marketing and lottery, taking into account feedback from community partners, applicants, and agency partners. I'll share with you a few of the key changes we have made. To improve access to people with disabilities or language access needs, HPD now requires that developers make greater efforts to reach people with disabilities through targeted advertising and provide translation and interpretation services throughout the marketing and lease-up process. The updated marketing guidelines also restrict the credit and background criteria developers may use to evaluate applicants, ensuring that New Yorkers who need affordable housing most are able to access it.
And Ms. Brown, if I could ask you to submit the balance of your entire testimony, I would appreciate that. Questions for Ms. Brown? Thank you. Our next speaker in support is Jordan Dressler.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Lago and members of the Commission. My name is Jordan Dressler. I'm the Civil Justice Coordinator. I oversee the Office of Civil Justice at the Human Resources Administration. Thank you for permitting me to appear before you today to discuss the work of the, thank you, to discuss HRA's work. We provide assistance and services to 3 million low-income children and adults, and we are the largest social services agency assisting annually through the administration of more than 12 major public assistance programs, as well as the nation's largest municipal identification program, IDNYC. Additionally, since June of 2015, HRA has been the home of the Office of Civil Justice, a permanent office created through a local law enacted by the City Council and the de Blasio administration to oversee, manage, and monitor the city's programs to provide civil legal assistance to New Yorkers in need. Most recently, with the integration of the Department of Homeless Services and HRA into the Department of Social Services, HRA now oversees Homebase, which connects households on the brink of homelessness with an extensive network of neighborhood-based services to help them remain in their communities and avoid entering shelter. The entirety of these programs represents a comprehensive set of public assistance programs and preventative services to enable New Yorkers to stably remain in their homes and in their neighborhoods. The provision of civil legal services for New Yorkers in need, in particular legal services for tenants facing harassment, displacement, and eviction, is a critical element in our fight. By investing in these important services, we are already seeing results. In 2016, 27% of tenants facing eviction in housing court in New York City, more than 1 in 4, had counsel. That's up from just 1% in 2013. At the same time, residential evictions by marshals have declined by about 24%. These advances are products of the administration's unprecedented commitment to increasing access for justice for tenants in need across the city. Since 2014, the de Blasio administration has increased funding for free legal assistance programs for tenants from roughly $6 million in fiscal year 2013 to approximately $62 million in fiscal year 2017. This includes over $33 million to support the city's anti-harassment and tenant protection legal services program, called AHTP, launched at HRA in 2015 in several neighborhoods across the city in which tenants face acute pressures of displacement, potential loss of affordable housing, and harassment through disrepair, buyout offers, and threats by unscrupulous landlords. One of those neighborhoods is East Harlem. Since October of 2015, our AHTP legal services providers, which include the Legal Aid Society, Legal Services NYC, and members of the LEAP Coalition, including the Urban Justice Center, Lenox Hill Neighborhood House, Mobilization for Justice, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, and NIMIC, have served over 900 households in the East Harlem zip codes of 10029 and 10035, providing legal assistance, advice, and representation to more than 2,800 East Harlem residents in need, including over 1,100 children. in addition to legal representation in court, including eviction defense and affirmative cases seeking repairs. I know.
Thank you, and thank you for returning, coming back, Mr. Dressler. We'll welcome getting your written testimony.
Thank you very much.
We'll now turn to 5 speakers in opposition, numbers 36, 37, 38, 39, and 40, beginning with Viviana Diaz.
Let's see. Good afternoon, committee. Good afternoon, everybody. We're all glad that we've reached another point. If I was in my class, I would address everybody. That's why I'm turning around. And coming from El Barrio, you never give your back to the door. Okay, thank you. So, good afternoon, committee, and to all that are here today. My name is Viviana Diaz, and I am an East Harlem resident, lovingly known as El Barrio. Integrity, character, loyalty, family, culture, cuchifritos y la música are just a few of the many wonderful, very good characteristics that make up El Barrio. When I come to these meetings, I always wish that I had something so technical to stand here like everybody else, but that is a lack of my preparation. And I usually come from the heart. So here I am. Light dispels darkness. Do not darken the character of El Barrio. Remember, Manhattan is only an island. And back in the day, you would never come and visit me. You would never pass 96th Street. But what's left today on this earth is land. And it's the only thing that gains and that man can conquer and can profit from. So I stand here today. To be counted as one of the many East Harlem residents that is saying no to rezoning. No. And being in art, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the poetry of your testimony,
Any
Ms.
questions?
Diaz. Questions?
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is Raphael. Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss? No. Oh, Commissioner Levin, please.
No, we're good. We're just making sure we got a quorum here.
Oh, okay, thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Raphael Moocher.
Hello. Hello, my name is Raphael Moocher. I'm a volunteer with Community Voices Heard, and I am a long-term resident of El Barrio, where they also work. I've been there for 19 years. I live on Lexington Avenue, in that gentrifying policing corridor of 103 and Lexington. My experience of housing in El Barrio has been one of continuous harassment and neglect by the landlord and the management company. And I live in a rent-stabilized apartment which supposedly gives me some level of protection. But I want to give you 3 examples of the harassment and the neglect that have been happening since I moved there in 2000, actually 1998. And to just give you an idea of why many of us are afraid to be displaced by yet another city plan that is supposed to improve our neighborhood. So 3 examples. So I filed a complaint with DHCR in 2000 because there was a leak in my bathroom, and it took 11 years for the management company to fix that, and the ceiling fell down twice. So before they admitted that there was a leak and came and fixed it, it took 11 years. The other example is that when a luxury condo was built across the street between 103 and 104 on Lexington, all the landlords in the area started prospecting to see how much they could charge the residents, how much more they could charge the residents. And then ending last year, last November, the landlord and the management company had previously taken me to housing court for three full years because we had dared to file a DHCR complaint when they took out the keyhole from the front door of the building and replaced it with a key fob apparatus, and they only gave us one key fob per apartment, which is in direct violation of DHCR rules or regulations. But after 3 years, we finally won the case. So we are very afraid in El Barrio. Poor and working class residents of color are very afraid that this is yet another boondoggle or just another giveaway to the developers and to the landlords, and that's why I'm urging you to vote no on this rezoning plan and also to vote in favor of a neighborhood-wide certificate of no harassment.
Thank you, Mr. Moutiz. Questions from the commission? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is Mahfouzar Rahman. Rahman. Thank you. I had difficulty with the handwriting.
Hello? Hello? Okay. Good afternoon, commissioners and members of the audience. My name is Mahfouzar Rahman. I am Vice Chair for Health, Human Services, Immigration, and Seniors on Community Board 11. But today I'll be speaking on my own behalf. While examining and working on this plan and this rezoning for over, let's say, 3-4 years, there are several significant failures in this rezoning plan. This is not what we wanted. This is not what we kind of expected this, but we did not expect it to be this bad. Looking at the MIH rules, they should be revised so that low-income New Yorkers in East Harlem have access to the new developments within the area. If we were to look at all things, a lot of New Yorkers in East Harlem don't even make the 30% AMI requirements to even qualify for a little new development. Please support anti-harassment, anti-displacement, and anti-eviction efforts. A lot of buildings in East Harlem need to be preserved. There are several landmarks and potential landmarks in the neighborhood that can be made. However, this rezoning more or less tarnishes a lot of the efforts underway and provides us with the lowest or even no more landmarks. This is not a small plan. This is a significant plan. This is 96 blocks that are being rezoned. One aspect I would like to speak more exclusively is on the health impact of the rezoning. Based on a study from the New York Academy of Medicine on gentrification, the leading health effect would be chronic stress due to all these changes, all these innings and outings happening around. And this is not something we should take lightly of. I expect more or less a public health crisis as a result of this rezoning. This city, as my closing would be, would rather preserve the Marion Sims statue on 5th Avenue than the homes of residents who persevered and are exceptional. Then you, commissioners, are not serving this community or this city if you don't vote no with no conditions. I yield my time to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rahman. Questions from the commissioners? Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Adriana Mack. Adriana Mack? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Lago, and Vice Chair Knuckles. Thank you so much, all the commissioners and of the audience. My name is Adriana Mack. I'm a Community Board 11 member. I'm here speaking on behalf of that position. However, I am also the director of East Harlem Talent Network, which has been named several times in several testimonies. But my testament is of my own, not of my employer, Strive International. I am here to say I'm opposing the rezoning because of all the aspects you have already heard, and I don't want to repeat them. But I'm really here more to talk about making sure we preserve the employment opportunities in East Harlem, that we continue to provide funding for training and upskilling people, and we also provide opportunities for apprenticeships and home ownership, and not just rentals, but allowing our new young families like mine to purchase homes in East Harlem. That's it. Very short statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mack. Questions? Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Marina Ortiz. Absolutely not. Not until you start speaking.
Thank you. So I'm going to just try to run through the written statement. So both the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan and the current rezoning plan are middle-class housing plans. So I oppose them both. The community planning process, with all due respect, was skewed and overtly politicized. Neither plan reflects the actual needs of our community. Even after 2 years of work on the part of many, many stakeholders and hundreds of thousands of dollars spent, it took the Justice Center and myself just 2 weekends to gather 900 petition signatures opposing the rezoning. Okay, y'all took 2 years to get 1,500 people to sign in at a meeting. We got 900 in 2 weekends. Most of them don't even know that this is going on. And we had explained very briefly, they said, no. Okay, we're gonna continue the petitioning through the City Council hearing. Even at the lowest area median income being offered, rezoning would provide 0 apartments for those who really need affordable housing, would exclude our homeless population entirely, not to mention seniors and the disabled. There's no need to hand over huge city-owned lots, community gardens, ball fields, and NYCHA lawns and playgrounds to private developers. Why especially reward vacant property owners who've warehoused buildings all along 3rd Avenue and neglected our needs for over 40 years by telling them the sky's now the limit? Upzoning to allow market-rate skyscrapers will destroy the very fabric of what has historically been an affordable tenement community serving immigrants and low-income people of color. You cannot use the as-of-right argument on the one hand and then turn over city-owned land to private developers like you did on 96th Street. Black and Latino East Harlem residents will lose their precious cultural legacy and political leverage if either of these rezoning plans are approved. East Harlem was founded as an affordable haven for low-income people. Most of the immigrant groups that settled here, they're elected to leave. But poor black and brown residents really don't have that privilege. We have nowhere to go. Being displaced at the rate of 4 or even 3 to 1 through 20 or 25% set-asides is not the answer. Rezoning is not the answer. Encouraging mass construction of thousands of mostly market-rate units that will likely remain vacant is not the solution. You will only exacerbate the problem. We've seen it in Williamsburg. We've seen it all over the country. We've seen it all over the world. We are an incredibly creative city. We can find solutions by making permanently affordable housing a priority. We can keep families together and help our children raise their families around the corner instead of being forced into a shelter or a jail. This nation was founded on the violent displacement of people of color. We cannot let that practice continue. Please find it in your heart to do the right thing and say no to any rezoning.
Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. Questions for Ms. Ortiz? Okay, I will note that we have reached the halfway point in the number of speakers who have signed up. And so for the benefit of the commissioners, that would suggest that the public hearing on this item will end at around 7:30, at which time we then have a public hearing on thereto. So just wanted to get that time check. We will now turn to two speakers in support, numbers 41 and 42, starting with Sidney Renwick. No, he. Okay, and then the second is Renaya Okazi. Okay, with that, we will turn to speakers in opposition and teeing up numbers 46, 47, 48, 49, and 50, starting with Lynn Lewis.
Good afternoon. My name is Lynn Lewis, and I'm a resident of East Harlem for 18 years, and I'm a founding board member of the East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust, which was referenced by Borough President Brewer and HPD. The East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust has unanimously voted to oppose the rezoning of the neighborhood largely because it does not provide deep enough affordability. I will also note that the neighborhood plan does not provide deep enough affordability for folks that currently live there. There are plenty of facts about the problem which you've heard, including from the city itself. 38% of people that live in the neighborhood make less than $24,500 a year. 40% are severely rent burdened. So we all agree on the problem. The rezoning is not the solution because it does not provide the housing that folks that live in the neighborhood need. 38% of the neighborhood is left out of this plan. With all good conscience, I don't understand how anybody can support a plan for our neighborhood that leaves out 30% of the people that live there. 38%. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. My children cannot afford to live in the neighborhood. I'm their primary co-caregiver for my grandson, who's 11 years old, plays basketball in East Harlem, just graduated from elementary school in East Harlem, goes to the boys club. My kids had to move outside of the neighborhood. They have jobs. They have good jobs. My daughter works at Ostos Community College, cannot afford to live in the community. The community is people that live there. So every person that's displaced is a tear in the neighborhood. But I want to talk about solutions because the city has mentioned the Community Land Trust. And speaking to your question, sir, we are in the process of negotiating with HPD with support from the Speaker's office, as you heard, for 3 city-owned buildings. But there are other city-owned buildings and there are vacant lots owned by the city that aren't even mentioned in the neighborhood plan. All of those should be set aside for the Community Land Trust because preserving is one thing. I live in a rent-stabilized apartment. I want it preserved. But that doesn't create new units for people that are overcrowded, for people that are homeless, for people that want to come back to the neighborhood. And so therefore, we need all the city-owned properties set aside. We're willing to engage in a planning process. We don't want to warehouse those properties, but they cannot be given away.
Ms. Lewis, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to submit the balance of your testimony in writing.
No problem. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Lewis? Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Thank you so much for speaking. If you could provide a map of the properties you think should be included in the land trust, that would be very helpful.
No problem.
Others? Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Our next speaker in opposition is Richse Long.
All right. Hi, my name is Richse Long. I'm an activist. I'm an organizer with the Justice Center in El Barrio, but I'm also a teacher. I teach in East Harlem. I teach on 103rd, and my students are struggling with homelessness. They are struggling to figure out where they're going to eat the next day, and in fact, the lunch that they get at school is the only lunch sometimes they get all day. That's their food. My students are homeless. My students are struggling to survive. And the reality is that currently, 1 in 5 students in East Harlem are homeless. And if you think for 1 minute that rezoning East Harlem is gonna somehow make it so that we have less homeless students, you're wrong. We look at Williamsburg, we look at the cities and all the parts of the city that have already been rezoned, and we know what happens. Our people leave, our communities leave. And where do we go? We go further uptown and further uptown, hoping for better rents, but there's not better rents. The reality of East Harlem is $2,000 a month is not affordable. And the affordable plans that you guys are planning to offer are only for people who make a median level income. When we heard before, 38% of people who live in East Harlem make $24,000 or less. So tell me, if you are gonna vote yes to this rezoning plan, you are absolutely voting to make my students homeless. You are absolutely voting to make sure that more and more of our communities and our people are being pushed out. There is no way around it. We can talk all this talk, everybody talking, want to say something, make it confusing, make it complicated, but it's really obvious what it is. When we vote yes on rezoning, it means that we are voting for the destruction of East Harlem, period. Period. No amount of cultural programs, no amount of preserving things here and there is going to change that reality, that our people need affordable housing. So I say, and all the people and all my students say, no to rezoning, 100% no to rezoning. No conditions. No, absolute no. And not just a no, we say, what do we need? We don't need a portion, we don't need a lottery, because 80,000 people are on those lists for those lotteries. Nobody can get into those homes. How are we going to talk about that? The reality is that we need 100% affordable housing. These streets belong to us. We work here. We live here. The reality is that we make this city run. We make this city run. And without us, who would clean the streets? Who would teach our students? Who would take care of children? Who would do anything without us? But we're the ones who get the short end of the stick. Our students are the ones who don't get good education, don't get good housing, literally can't even leave their buildings sometimes. My disabled students cannot even leave their building because the elevator is broken. They can't go to school. That's the reality. There is no money for our communities. There is no money for any of us, but now there's money. Now you want to have money because you want to build a nice luxury apartment for wealthy people to come and move in. That's the truth. That's the truth, honestly. We need to be able to stand up for our communities, and we're going to keep organizing. We're not going away. This doesn't stop here. These are our petitions. We petitioned. We have 900 people who signed in 2 weekends. Better believe tomorrow we can get 1,000 more. And the next day, and the next day. And we're going to keep coming out, and we're going to keep getting these petitions, and we're going to fight. We demand a meeting with people on this commission.
Ms.
We
Long,
demand.
we have 37 other speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if your teaching is half as effective as your advocacy, your students are fortunate. Our next speaker in opposition is Sophia Weissman. No, I'm afraid we don't allow double speakers. You should. Okay, thank you, Ms. Weissman. Our next speaker in opposition is Juan Peralta.
Good evening. My name is Juan Peralta. Just give me 1 second. My name is Juan Peralta. I'm a resident of Harlem, and I'm a community organizer. I've lived in Harlem my entire life, born and raised in Harlem. I work in a school in Harlem. I've had multiple jobs in Harlem. I've been here my entire life. I'll say Harlem is as much me as I am it. So I just start with some heartfelt shit. Sorry about the cursing. So I am the son of an immigrant mother and immigrant grandmother. They both raised me together. Since they got their citizenship, they've always told me about the importance of voting, how we have to go out and vote for our representatives because these are the people that are going to make the decisions that we can't make because we're too busy working and going to school. As I've grown older, I've realized that it doesn't matter how many times I go out, how early I go out to the ballot, I still end up getting the short end of the stick. In East Harlem, there are 100,000 people living in East Harlem, yet I hear a bunch of people coming up to the microphone being proud about their community engagement when they spoke to 1,000 people. 100,000 people living in East Harlem, and the most important thing to them is where they live. 100,000 people that don't know what is going on right now. These meetings are being held behind their backs, truly behind their backs, because they do not have the voice. We went out for 2 weeks, and we got 900 signatures. We spoke to people that didn't know about any of the public hearings, didn't know about the community board. The community board itself, which we've gone multiple times, and you know, they seem mediocre. They came out today and said they were against it, but it didn't look like it when we were going at these meetings. People that were not elected by the community, people that were appointed, people that were not democratically elected are choosing whether or not to sell out East Harlem. People that have their so-called stakeholders, which just means that they got the money. They own the businesses, they own the buildings, but they're not the ones that are putting in the work. They're not the ones that are living in these buildings. They're not the ones that are living in the NYCHA buildings, like the lady who's not here anymore, who really reminded me of Cruella de Vil when she came up here. I've been in these buildings. These buildings have black mold. These buildings have vents that are completely dirty. They have 2 people working in these buildings, and she's talking about putting up cameras. Putting up cameras, people are dying of cancer because of the black mold in the building, and she's worried about some cameras. The truth is that we live in poverty, and we live in crime because of it.
Thank you, Mr. Peralta. Questions? Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Caleb Paulino.
Hello, all power to the people always. I feel like I'm at a meeting for the Scramble for Africa, where a lot of white people stand up and talk about how communities of color are going to be redistributed, right? Where resources are going to be spent and what we need. The community of East Harlem is a very resilient community. It's a community that has had to have resistance because East Harlem has never gotten, as many of the members that spoke that have been residents for long-term residents of East Harlem, never got any of the things that they needed just to survive in dignified living conditions, although they were paying their rents consistently. This is something that we see in all of the hoods of this nation and all of the hoods right here in this city. When we talk about the South Bronx, that is also now being, you know, gentrified. When we talk about East Harlem, when we talk about so many areas of Brooklyn, when we talk about West Harlem, somebody was talking about 125th, that it looks like a shopping mall, where before, when it was communities of color that had to put real sweat, real blood, and generations and generations and generations and little grains of sand just to make a little sandbox, and you got people colonizing whole fucking oceans and bringing the whole sand onto the land to then tell you can't sit on it. That's what we're experiencing. This whole, you know, rezoning, and I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, and I'm not actually sorry. We have every right to be emotional. These are our communities. They are being destroyed. The people that are coming in do not have our best interest at heart. You know this because you all scratch each other's back because you pay each other's checks. You know that you are not on the side of the people. These are communities that have worked hard. These are working poor communities. We're not talking about, oh, you know, the same way that they always try to make it seem like, oh, these communities have been here forever. They've never done anything. No, these are people that have come, immigrants, to not speaking the language. We know each other. We love each other. We stand up for each other. And the moment that this rezoning plan is passed, if you choose, because you do have, right, the power to choose to say no or say yes. If you choose to approve the rezoning of East Harlem, everything will be a pour door. We will be in a revolving pour door because it will no longer be our communities. And every time that we walk down our streets, we will feel that morning, the same morning that we feel every time that we have to leave our countries to come to this country because of the colonization that has existed. If your ancestors were slave owners, that is not our, maybe you did not choose that, but right now on this earth that you stand on today, you can choose this. Every one of those buildings would be like a Columbus statue, except it would be sky high. And every time that we look at it, we would remember that we are still living the same white supremacy that we have always been living, that you do not care about us, that ultimately these affordable housing units, affordable housing that is not affordable to us, would only be so that you could have your slave class in your communities to do all of the jobs that you do not want to do. And we don't want to be your slave. We are not asking to be your slaves. We have fought very hard for what we have. what to you may not be a lot, because then you come with your white savior complex telling us what we need, even though we've always known what we needed, but you will not give us the resources to organize within our own communities. So if you really care about our communities, then you would start putting resources to fix the houses that are already there. The fact that ACS is over here talking about their further rezoning is a damn shame, because everybody that works in ACS has gone into these city buildings and have seen how they're deteriorating, and people are raising their families in these subhuman conditions because you do not want to put money where for our, you know, dignified living.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you.
We will continue with our next speaker in opposition, Roger Hernandez. Thank you.
I thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chairman Knuckles, and the rest of the commission, friends and neighbors from El Barrio. My name is Roger Hernandez, and I am the coordinator for Barrio Unite, a community resident organization that's in opposition to this rezoning. I have a prepared statement, and I'm going to read from it. The East Harlem community never invited this MIHQZM amendment proposal, and it does not support it. This proposal is a horrifying displacement plan of East Harlem's poor, masked as a Trojan horse being pushed by the New York City administration of Mayor William de Blasio. In fact, the CB11 voted against the plan with 2 abstentions in November of 2015 and again in 2017. Manhattan Borough President Gail E. Brewer does not support this plan, and now it is New York City's City Planning Commission's prerogative to kill this gentrification plan. East Harlem's 181,236 majority of residents live mostly with incomes of less than $50,000. This information is Exhibit Figure 3-3 of the East Harlem Rezoning DEIS report, with a median household income of $36,064. That's Table 3.4. That makes this area decidedly poor and vulnerable. This is quite remarkable for a special, vibrant community viewed as the working man's Manhattan by Columbia University School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, 2011. Kindly put this plan to rest with your rationale considerations. Under the worst-case scenario, the mayor's rezoning action will escalate the burden against East Harlem's low-income population by establishing 70% of the total available new housing for households earning more than $78,300. That comes from Table 3-8, page 3-22 of the DEIS report. That's a fact. Ironically, this plan is being waxed as a mandatory inclusionary housing plan for East Harlem, while it is actually does not present any level of affordability for its own residents, nor is it mandatory as it is actually exclusionary, discounting a majority of East Harlem's families, friends, and neighbors because of their own low-income status. This aggressive targeting of East Harlem's current residents is viewed as a racist ploy to displace Latino and African Americans out of Manhattan and out of New York City. How could it be viewed otherwise? New York City's governmental policy after World War II created the legislative conditions that allowed landlords diminishing profits to cut back on the necessary maintenance and operations to preserve affordable housing, creating New York City slums during the 1950s, leading to the total deterioration of its vital affordable housing stock. That was deplorable. It was our nation's inner-city community-based organizations of the 1960s that forced governmental action to rehabilitate our communities with vital financial assistance that was sucked out by fleeing landlords, and more so by the progressive legislation that proactively committed New York City's future, supporting its neighborhoods, its communities, and moreover, its residents. This was a hard lesson that we will not soon forget.
Mr. Hernandez, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to submit the written testimony, as we have over 20 additional speakers waiting to speak. Thank you.
Would you have any questions for me, Chair?
Questions for Mr. Hernandez? Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Paula Siegel. Yes. You're up. And I should note that the upcoming speakers are 58, 59, and 60. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Paula Siegel. I am speaking today as an attorney in the Equitable Neighborhoods practice of the Community Development Project at the Urban Justice Center. Our project works with grassroots groups, neighborhood organizations, and community coalitions to help make sure that people of color, immigrants, and other low-income residents who've built our city are not pushed out in the name of progress. We work together with our partners and clients to ensure that residents in historically under-resourced areas have stable housing they can afford, places where they can connect and organize, jobs to make a good living, and other opportunities that allow people to thrive. Today, we're here with our collaborators from the Pratt Center for Community Development and the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development to reinforce the remarks of the neighbors from Community Voices Heard that you've been hearing all afternoon. They're our partners in East Harlem. With those residents, we urge you commissioners to heed the advice of the borough president and the community board and to vote no to stop the irresponsible upzoning of East Harlem. I'll focus the rest of my remarks today on the inadequate draft environmental impact statement the department has produced as documentation of the impacts of the proposed action. The DEIS incredibly fails to include detailed socioeconomic assessments that the city's technical manual for SECRA requires sponsors of land use actions that will drive significant neighborhood changes to perform. Detailed analyses are required anytime that a proposed action will do any of the following. Whenever a proposed project will directly displace more than 500 residents, whenever a project will result in substantial new development that is markedly different from existing uses, development, and activities within the neighborhood, and whenever the average income of the directly displaced population is markedly lower than the average income of the rest of the study area population. If all the sites where direct displacement will become inevitable after an upzoning were properly counted in the draft environmental impact statement, the number of residents likely to be so displaced would be much more than 500. The DEIS achieves its low count by excluding all the buildings of 6 units or more, relying on an illusory and fictional protections for residents of those buildings as a reason to leave them out of the count. The luxury development that's a prerequisite for the application of MIH, which we've been hearing about, on a per project basis will bring markedly different uses, development, and activities to what is now a predominantly Black and Hispanic low-income neighborhood. This difference alone is sufficient to require a detailed assessment. The income disparity between those slated to be displaced versus those who will be able to remain and move in similarly triggers the same requirement. And a detailed assessment is not a mere exercise. Such an assessment
Ms. Siegel, we're going to have to ask that. I know you've submitted your testimony and the commission will look at it. Thank you very much. Our next speaker in opposition is Chris Walters.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Walters, and I'm the Rezoning Technical Assistance Coordinator for the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development, ANHD, and as Paula just mentioned, one of several technical assistance providers for Community Voices Heard. ANHD is a membership organization of neighborhood-based housing and economic development groups with a mission to ensure flourishing neighborhoods and decent, affordable housing for all New Yorkers. I'll be testifying today on the residential displacement impacts that are of concern in the proposed rezoning of East Harlem, and specifically on problems with the methodology that DCP uses in evaluating those impacts. In evaluating the impacts of residential displacement, the DEIS excludes all buildings that have 6 or more units from its analysis, on the false assumption that tenants in those buildings are rent stabilized and so free from displacement risks. This assumption is wrong on 2 levels. 1, in assuming that all multi-unit buildings are rent stabilized, and 2, assuming that rent stabilized tenants are free from displacement risk. These false assumptions lay the foundation for the department's underestimation of the displacement impacts of the proposed rezoning. The direct residential displacement analysis is based on the DEIS's reasonable worst-case development scenario, which identifies soft sites for projected development. Yet this development scenario excludes all sites where multi-unit buildings are currently located, based on the erroneous conclusion that the required relocation of rent-stabilized units will make development of these sites unlikely. This means the city assumes that any building with 6 or more units is rent-stabilized. This is simply not true. In Community District 11, hundreds of buildings with 6 or more residential units totaling thousands, 6 or more residential units totaling thousands of units have left rent stabilization entirely, to say nothing of those buildings which were never rent stabilized to begin with. Tenants in these buildings, whether formerly stabilized or not, can be evicted anytime their lease is up. Landlords can demolish these buildings at their discretion or sell to a developer who will. The upzoning proposed for East Harlem will only incentivize this further. Furthermore, there is no guarantee that rent-stabilized households are themselves free from displacement risk. In theory, these residents are protected from displacement, but in reality, rent-stabilized tenants face a wide range of harassment tactics or legal loopholes used to drive them out of their homes, especially where there is a financial incentive to do so. In East Harlem, for example, there are close to 5,000 households that are currently paying a preferential rent for their rent-stabilized unit, households that, again, have not been taken into account when considering displacement pressures. But as land values and rents increase following the rezoning, what's to stop a landlord from raising the rent to a level that might force these tenants out? If the DEIS included multi-unit buildings in its reasonable worst-case development scenario and both direct and indirect displacement analysis, the findings for displacement impacts would be significant, requiring a detailed socioeconomic assessment. We request that the final EIS include multi-unit buildings in its analysis to achieve a more accurate picture of the displacement impacts this proposed rezoning may have on East Harlem and its residents. This process should not move forward until this assessment has been made. Thank you.
Efficient use of the time. Mr. Walters, question. Our next speaker in opposition is Paula Crespo. Oh, thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Ray Rogers.
Thank you. Ray Rogers, a 17-year resident of El Barrio. How many of you up at the podium there have ever read the book Zoned Out? Nobody? You all need to read it. I'm going to quote from it in just a minute. How many of you are familiar with the Real Estate Board of New York called REBNY? Now, come on, let's see your hands. How many?
Sir, I would ask that you make the testimony and then we can ask questions of you.
Okay.
Please.
Well, let me just read from the book Zoned Out, because I think it'll give some perspective on this meeting. It is no coincidence that the single largest contributor to the campaigns of local elected officials is the real estate industry. The city's planning and housing bureaucracies are responsible for translating the needs of the real estate industry into policy. The city uses its authority to create an air of inevitability that robs people of any power to control the future of their communities. The city's planning department promotes exercises in community-based planning, but whenever neighborhoods have developed their own well-reasoned plans, the official planners throw them away. Exactly. Time and time again. Exactly. Now, the rezoning plans throughout New York City and East Harlem are a form of cruel and inhumane treatment for current residents and small businesses and the environment. These are not the mayor's or the city council's policies. These are the REBNY's policies. They tell the mayor and the head of the city council and those local political leaders who they fill their pockets with cash what the policies, the zoning policies of this city are going to be. And that has to stop, and it has to stop now. What do the rezoning policies do under REBNY's leadership? They exacerbate the homelessness crisis and the lack of affordable housing. What does REBNY's policies do for small businesses? About 1,000 small businesses a month, I understand, are shutting down because of their policies. Just look at all the empty buildings and the storefronts, mom and pop places up there in East Harlem. Where's the Small Business Job Survival Act? You want to help empower small businesses? Why is the mayor and the head of the city council not allowing that to come to a vote, even though more than half the city council sponsor that bill? And how about the alarming increase in the deaths of construction workers? 2015 and 2016, 29 of 31 deaths were on non-union jobs. Why? Because REBNY wants open shop. They don't want any unions. They're busting the construction unions in the city. Yet Rebney itself is a closed shop. And what about compromising and corrupting our political system with dirty money? That's Rebney, the Real Estate Board of New York. They're a bunch of bullies and racketeers. And if you people up there at this podium listen to Rebney and follow Rebney's policies, then damn it, there's something wrong with every one of you, because they're tearing this city apart.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr.
So my
Rogers.
last thing is this.
No, Mr.
Please,
Rogers, I'm
do not
afraid
support
we
the
have,
racketeers and bullies of Rebney. Thank you.
any questions for Mr. Rogers?
You have any questions? Shoot.
Thank you. We'll now
Okay,
move
I
on
will
to
be-
the next group of speakers in opposition. Thank you. And it will be numbers 76, 77. Oh, no, I am sorry. I got ahead of myself. 66, 67, 68, 69, and 70. And starting with Pilar de Jesus. Okay. The next is Alexander Adams. Opposition. Yep.
Thank you very much. Hello. Thank you very much, Commission. My name is Alexander Adams. I'm the Executive Director for Civitas, and we are a nonprofit that was founded in 1981, specifically focused on East Harlem and the Upper East Side. We advocate for smart growth, cultural preservation, and enhancing the built environment. We've been working since day one on this project. We were at the community stakeholder meetings. We have been working with other organizations, with the city and the community as a founding stakeholder. Despite all this work and all these hours, all the meetings, all the emails, walking the streets, currently no one supports the plan 100%. Nobody, no one. You hear a lot about modifications. We talk about substitutions, and yet there's been little, if any, mediation or concessions towards the community in this process. So currently, even after all of this, we are still here. We're still here to meet with you and talk about solutions. Because we're not in NIMBY, we're talking about solutions here, which brings me to the positions of Civitas's board. We believe that there should be, inclusive to the scope, there should have been an expansion and an inclusion, people have said, of the rest of the entire neighborhood from 96 to 104th and east of 2nd Avenue. If you're going to do a planning plan, you might as well plan the entire neighborhood. We should not even be talking about R10. We should just like throw it off. I mean, it's immaterial, and except next to Metro North, and start with R9A, which is going to be a contextual zoning that allows for inclusionary housing. Consistency and predictability. When you go and put a chunk of money down on your property, you want consistency and predictability. The system today is not consistent or predictable, and the current set of bonuses and base FAR is not consistent or predictable. Predictability and contextual zoning we are striving for. We believe in the sky plane angles that New York City pioneered. They use them all over the nation, all over the world now, and we think it's something that's important. We believe in transit-oriented development in the transit zones, but transit zones and overlays at all the stations. Don't pick and choose stations. If you're going to put transit zones, all of them. We ask for keeping the mid-block residential character, and we ask that new developments must and should continue to improve subway access when they're adjacent. They should be improving sidewalks and street trees and lighting for a safe, inviting place to live. We support the inclusionary
Thank you, Mr.
housing.
Adams. If you could submit your written testimony
And
so
I-
that we could read it.
And that's pretty much it.
Thank
and
you.
I have the rest. I have the
Thanks
written
very much.
testimony, and I have a copy of our newsletter which talks about the neighborhood.
Thanks. Questions for Mr. Adams? Our next speaker in opposition is Joyce Chediak Wilcox. Ms. Wilcox? Okay, our next speaker in opposition is Paul Wilcox. Our next is Justin Wayne. Okay, we will then move on to the next group of speakers, 76, 77, 78, and 79, starting with Shi Rong Chang.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak here tonight. My name's Shirang Chong. I'm an East Harlem resident, and I live in Nitro Public Housing. Today, public housing is desperately in need of repairs and is severely underfunded. My building itself, similar to so many other buildings in New York City under public housing, is suffering from chronic leaks and toxic mold. NYCHA has estimated that it would take $17 billion alone to make the minimal repairs necessary just to bring the housing stock up to code. I would like to see a fulfillment of $200 million from the city for East Harlem to make the necessary repairs for the neighborhood. But we're not here to talk about public housing tonight. We're talking about rezoning. And I grew up in El Barrio. I remember the neighborhood and how it was like when I moved in 1997. It was a different place back then. As a skinny Chinese kid with a funny name, it was an intimidating place to live. Crime was pervasive. And I remember the shuttered storefronts and abandoned buildings. And I remember that we only had one store that sold food that you could barely even call a supermarket. But today, the neighborhood's changed. The neighborhood's very different, but the danger is still present. Instead of violent street criminals, we've traded them for greedy landlords and real estate speculators. I don't worry about getting mugged, but I worry about being homeless and not being able to afford a place to live. We've already got big box chain stores that have replaced the abandoned buildings, but the future can be seen today with the mega construction projects that are way more ambitious than before. You can see it in the 10-story cranes and in the way they move the earth. Currently, with few restrictions, landlords can already build up to 12 stories. And instead of actually building, many just keep their properties boarded up and in a state of decay, sometimes even failing to maintain it and allowing dangerous debris to fall onto the streets. Just this week in East Harlem, construction on an empty lot caused the structural integrity of an existing adjacent building to be compromised. 2 buildings, I'm being told. All tenants were forced to be evacuated and left homeless. The other thing that real estate speculators and landlords do is they leave their lots empty while paying the real estate taxes, absorbing the costs. They're just waiting for a large payday when instead of being restricted by the building code, they can build as tall as they want.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Questions? Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Esther Davory. Esther Davory? Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Pearl Berkeley. And then the final registered speaker in opposition is Lo Vandervalk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Lo Vandervalk. I represent Carnegie Hill Neighbors. We are sympathetic to the East Harlem rezoning proposal, so that is our basis point. Carnegie Hill, the area of the zoning being considered, rezoning being considered, is well outside of Carnegie Hill, but we have been, over the years, involved in various aspects of East Harlem, especially as they are lower down at 96th, 97th, and 98th Streets. We opposed, for example, the tower by Mount Sinai at 102 102nd Street 15 years ago, and more recently we've been opposed to the ECF East 96th Street tower that you're well aware of, and I'm aware that something came up this morning. We hope to find out. We're still opposing that, especially the alienation, which has not been finalized at the state level. But on the rezoning, we support the initiative of Alt-A text amendment, because we think that height limits for Park Avenue and 3rd Avenue will be very useful for the context of Harlem. So that's the extent of my testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwall. Questions? Okay, that concludes the list of people who have registered to speak, but if there are others who are present who would want to be heard, I would ask that you approach the microphone. Okay, I will then note that the record on this matter is going to remain open for 10 days to receive comments on the draft environmental impact statement. It will be open through Tuesday, the 5th of September, and with that, the public hearing is closed.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 38 through 44, CD 11, number 38, C170361 ZMM, number 39, N170362 ZRM, number 40, C170363 HAM, number 41, C170364 PQM, number 42, C170365 ZSM, number 43, C170366 ZSM, number 44, C170367 ZSM. Public hearing in the matter of applications for zoning map and zoning text amendments, UDAP designation, disposition of city-owned property, acquisition of property, and for the grant of special permits concerning the Sendero Verde East 111th Street. Notice, a public hearing is being held by the City Planning Commission in conjunction with the above ULURP hearings to receive comments related to a draft environmental impact statement. This hearing is being held pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the City Environmental Quality Review.
We are going to have a 10-minute presentation by the applicant team comprised of Kevin Paris, Fred Harris, Deborah Molis, and Barack Robel. If I could ask you to begin promptly, as we've been sitting here for a while. Could I ask the applicant team to please begin the presentation even as the drawings are being put up?
Good afternoon, good evening. Good afternoon, Chair Largo, Vice Chair Knuckles, and the rest of the City Planning Commissioners. My name is Kevin Paris, and I am the Senior Planner for Manhattan Planning at the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. This afternoon, I am very pleased to testify in support of this ULURP application for the proposed development known as Sendero Verde, an approximately 650-unit affordable housing project located between Park and Madison Avenues and East 111th and 112th Streets within East Harlem in Manhattan. The project will include community facility space for a Dream Charter School, the YMCA, Mount Sinai, Union Settlement, as well as retail space. The actions needed to facilitate this project include disposition of city-owned property, UDAP designation and project approval, a zoning map amendment to change an R72 and an R72/C14 district to an R9/C25 district, zoning text amendment for MIH designation.
Shh, excuse me, Mr. Paris. Please hold it down in the back. Thank you. Proceed.
No problem. Thank you. Acquisition authority to acquire the community gardens post-construction and special permits to allow for the intended building design. This project will also require an amendment to the Millbank-Frawley Urban Renewal Plan, which is traveling with the application for the East Harlem rezoning that we just heard. Sendero Verde is a 100% affordable housing project, which targets a range of affordability levels. More than half of the units will be affordable to low-income households. This target is aligned with the Mayor's housing plan to address the housing needs for these income levels. The Sendero Verde project will encompass the entirety of Block 1617, save for 2 privately owned lots. There are currently 6 community gardens located on the site, 4 of which will be incorporated into the new development. The other 2 gardens will be incorporated into nearby garden sites. For a number of years, the center for the site was utilized as a baseball field for the East Harlem Little League. The Parks and Recreation Department worked with the East Harlem Little League and have identified a relocation space at the Thomas Jefferson Park field. Sendero Verde is the first project to be designated through an RFP that also included a community visioning report for the site as an addendum. This report was generated through extensive community engagement, including a community workshop with approximately 100 attendees, consisting of smaller meetings with local stakeholders, as well as meetings with Community Board 11 and local officials. Respondents to the RFP were encouraged to submit proposals that incorporated priorities outlined in the community visioning report. Those proposals that were most responsive to the goals outlined in the report were given preference in the designation process. HPD attached the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan as an additional RFP addendum to ensure that the vision outlined in this process also contributed to the development of RFP responses. Furthermore, HPD held a number of meetings with community gardeners whose gardens will be incorporated into the new development, which resulted in a garden profiles document that was added as an addendum to the RFP. This document provided a framework of the gardeners' needs for their future spaces to the RFP respondents. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to the rest of the development team, who will walk us through the project's background, the design strategies, and the community partnerships. Thank you, and we'll be here to answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
Hello, my name is Fred Harris. I'm here representing Jonathan Rose Companies on behalf of the selected development team for Sendero Verde. Sendero Verde development team is a partnership of Jonathan Rose Companies, L&M Development Partners, and a not-for-profit, the Acacia Network. Jonathan Rose Companies, as the lead developer, has always seen its mission in developing green, affordable, green housing that increases societal equity, and we look to be groundbreaking in our approach of showing what development can do for residents and communities. We call the overall approach creating communities of opportunity, and we've, in many places, both with new construction and existing buildings, tried to put into practice elements of a strategy that will really improve the well-being both of residents and the neighbors of new development. Our key in developing a plan for this property was, first of all, to use the 4 community gardens, which were specified as to be permanently resident on the site, as a key piece of the design strategy. We then looked for community partners that would really enhance the lives of people throughout their lives, increase their wellness and opportunity. Our partners include the Dream Charter School, which will locate a high school on the site, which has been very successful in East Harlem in providing high-quality educational environment for residents, and which we were part of creating the East Harlem Center for learning and living where their current middle school facility is located. Union Settlement would serve both young people and older people throughout the day in a new facility. There would be a unique partnership between Mount Sinai and the YMCA to create healthcare that really looks at going beyond a straight medical approach and including a healthier lifestyle as part of improving people's lives. We wanted to maximize public use of the space, so in addition to the 4 community gardens that are preserved, or although relocated, we took what would have been the rear yards of the buildings and have made them basically an open space that will be open to the public and which actually sits on top of the roof of some of the key facilities that are part of the community partners. I'm now going to turn this over to take you through the design process to Deborah Mullis of Handel Architects.
Hello, thank you for having us here today. I would like to...
If you could please, if you're going to be talking to the slides, take the microphone.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
That's great. Okay, perfect. So this diagram here is what Fred was just explaining, really describes the general organization of the site. We've located the mass of the building on Madison Avenue, which really makes sense because Madison Avenue has a lot of tall buildings already. We've pushed down the building on the south and left as much area to the south open to get the best sun for the community gardens and also to get the best sun into the courtyard, which will be accessible to the public. And then on the north side of the site, we've located a bar building. So this rendering here describes, looking from Park Avenue, looking to the west, it describes what that space will feel like and look like in the center courtyard. This space will be open to the public and it will allow a sort of stroll from Park Avenue, linking Park Avenue across the whole block and exiting here onto Madison Avenue. So this sort of pathway is, a sendero is actually a pathway, which is why we named it Sendero Verde, sort of a green pathway through the site, meandering, and passing by the community gardens that will be flanking this pathway. So also something that's very important to the organization of the project is how we want to bring people into the site. We want to invite people in. So we want a lot of permeability, a lot of ways to get into the site. We'll have retail on Madison Avenue, entrances to the residential buildings, entrances to the community partners, the YMCA, Mount Sinai, the school, and the Union Settlement. So lots of entrances, lots of ways to get into the building. And then on the second floor, lots of ways to get out of the building and to engage onto the courtyard. So the idea is that people come in, come up, engage, move around, lots of different activities, different opportunities for activity. So unless there are any questions, I believe that Barack is coming up next.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, Chair Lago. My name is Barack Robel from the firm of Holland & Knight, and we've been assisting the development team at HPD on the land use application. As Kevin Parrish eloquently introduced, the actions that were necessary to facilitate the proposal, they're listed here again, and I can go through them if you like. I don't necessarily think at this late hour you want me to belabor you with the technical details of the waivers, but if there are any questions that arise, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
I would ask commissioners if they have questions of any members of the applicant team. Commissioner Efron.
Yes, could you just explain why there's a blank wall on Park Avenue? And then a second question is about the high school, the Dream Charter High School, and whether or not they will have priority or exclusive access to any playing field or public space during the course of the day.
So the problem is this existing parcel, right? This is an existing out parcel that we do not have control over. So this edge here, which is this edge here, is a lot line condition, right? So we can't have legal windows on this facade. We're just simply not allowed. We feel that this area can have some activation, perhaps a mural, perhaps some sort of decoration, if you may, but it really does need to be a 2-hour rated separation. So I can show that to you again here.
I just want to confirm, so the view we see over there has windows?
This view, we don't really own this land, but this land is part of our zoning lot. So it's a different condition. It is a different condition. These windows are legal windows for the units. So we're sort of, it's legal to have windows here, to use them for light and air for the bedrooms.
Sorry, I actually meant that one, but that's the other parcel right?
This one has the same problem, actually. When we get above a certain height, we could have legal windows, and we need to protect them properly, et cetera. So that's what's going on that facade.
So because it's Park Avenue, you have a higher height threshold?
Yes,
and therefore,
this building could rise, we believe, above this building. So it's sort of problematic. And your other question was Dream Charter School, the idea, where's the plan, the second floor? So the idea that Dream Charter School, we hope to have their cafeteria on the second floor. And we do hope that they come out, hang out, enjoy the courtyard, use it for their outdoor space for lunch. There won't be any ball playing or that type of activity out there, but we expect there to be congregation and interaction with the community on that during the day.
okay, but they won't have exclusive use at any point?
No. The program here is really to be shared by all the community partners, by the community at large, but really anybody.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Marin.
Thank you. So you did answer one of my questions, which was concerning the lot line windows, and I kind of assumed that the out parcel next to Park Avenue would have been taller, which is why there are no windows on that facade. But you also have another lot line condition here where you've indicated that there could be a possibility in the future of someone building or demolishing that building and then rebuilding it. Is the height, do your windows preclude a certain height for this?
We understand this building to actually be currently overbuilt.
Got it.
So we don't think it can get any higher and probably will stay because it's overbuilt. So
Thank you. That was one question. The second question was venting in the garage. So knowing that you have...
No garage.
You don't have a garage?
No garage.
Oh.
That's easy.
Sorry. That was good. I'm confusing it. Thank you.
That was 10 o'clock this morning. That was a project we certified on Monday. More questions? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
I guess I'll ask a short question first and maybe a longer question. You have the images from Park Avenue that's down, buried in the pile on the floor there. And you described the pathway going into the project. From over here, those aren't cars parked on that pathway, are they? What are those little...
No, these are planters.
Oh, okay.
These are planters.
So is there an elevation change? Those are
yes,
stairs? What's going on
there's
there?
about 16 feet of elevation change, which is, we are pushing the gym for the public school, the gym and the auditorium under the courtyard. Those are necessary spaces for that program. And so by pushing those under, so underneath the courtyard is the gym, the auditorium, and the pools for the Y, so they're pushing the courtyard up.
Okay. So then how about ADA access to the open space from Park Avenue?
Right, so we have an elevator that will take care of that over here, and this ramp, the idea here, it's accessible to all. We want this ramp to be, this is the only means of egress or access for both, and it is a compliant ADA ramp.
Okay. And then I had a question about the program. Our briefing materials mentioned supermarket and the Dream Charter School, but didn't tell us anything about, didn't identify the YMCA or the Mount Sinai piece of the project. So could you elaborate a little bit more about what those programs will be and how much space they'll be? Will the Y be a regular, full-scale kind of Y? You referred to the collaboration between Mount Sinai and the Y, but will Mount Sinai be doing other health-related work on the site? What's the full package of programming for both of those partners?
Sure. So Mount Sinai is located under the tower and is approximately 25,000 square feet. And they will have a connection with the Y so that patients can enjoy or really get therapy through both programs. The Y is estimated, we're showing here 30, we think it'll be a little smaller than 30. And then Dream Charter School is about 100. And then Union Settlement is about 11,000. Union Settlement is in the building we call Building C, the building to the south.
In terms of the program, so Mount Sinai will offer primary care in an office, in a setting with doctors' offices, but the unique partnership is the Y. This is not going to be a standard neighborhood YMCA. It's really built to accommodate the needs for activity by people that are referred from Mount Sinai. There will be as well an opportunity for people to use the facility directly, but you shouldn't be expecting sort of the standard Y with the lap pool and gym and so forth. And at this point, they are right, and they are not. They're not sure whether there will be any sort of direct membership or whether it simply will be all through medical referrals.
So would this maybe be more like the exercise space in a large apartment building, a private gym kind of thing?
It would be. I think it would go a step beyond that. I mean, one of the things that is important to it is the idea of these therapy pools, which have been, very effective. Both the folks at Mount Sinai and the folks at the Y looked at that approach. I think the buildings will have conventional exercise rooms for, meant to sort of be a well-being center and help Mount Sinai begin to really improve population health. That's the thrust that they're going.
And two more program questions, if I may. How is Union Settlement planning to use this space, and will it replace space that they have elsewhere? And then what's labeled here is just retail. Is that the supermarket, and do you have a supermarket partner?
I would just note, Commissioner Levin, that our next speaker is from Union Settlement, and so we'll be able to answer.
You don't have to answer that part of the question.
So I would, that was my suggestion, yeah. We do not have a supermarket partner, and there is a newish supermarket diagonally across the street. So while we really would like to have something that focuses on food and fills a need that it doesn't, that is at the moment still undetermined.
Other questions? I actually have a question about the second out parcel and what the condition is, whether there's a grade change, how the development works around that.
Well, that parcel is at grade with the community garden. So, and we currently know that there's trucks parked on there. It's a landscaping company. So for the moment, we hope that the community garden landscaping will cover it, as well as we'll have a fence behind here, and we'll hope to control that view as much as we possibly can. But that's what's going on this parcel at this moment. It's at grade, the same elevation as the community garden.
Thank you. Okay, thanks to the applicant team.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
We'll now turn to some speakers in support, starting with David Nascenti.
members of the commission. It's good to be back. I won't bore you with who union settlement is, because you just had a little preview of that. As you can imagine, our position on this project, the touchstone for that was its consistency with the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. We were deeply involved in developing that plan, as you know, and so in looking at any project, that's really important to us. The East Harlem Neighborhood Plan did not have any specific zoning recommendations for this site, so we had to look to see whether it was consistent with the principles and goals of the plan. Not perfect, but largely so. So first of all, 100% affordable, no market rate units. So that's really important to us because it was really helping to fulfill the obligation to do affordable housing. 6 tiers of affordability, including 20% of units for individuals earning 30% or less of AMI. Again, we talked earlier about the large number of East Harlem residents that are low income, and so having that commitment of 20% was very important. 40% of the apartments being permanently affordable, and 60% being affordable for a period between 40 or 60 years was also very important to us. 50% of the units being set aside with the preference for Community District 11 residents, setting aside space for the existing community gardens. The developers have proposed a really robust and comprehensive local hiring plan, which was going to include free OSHA training to try to bring local residents into jobs at the site. 140,000 square feet of community space to actually serve the local residents from the surrounding community, and pursuing passive house certification to make it environmentally friendly. So the totality of the efforts we thought were really strong. Not a perfect match with the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, but really a really strong commitment. And so we're really proud to be project partners. To answer Commissioner Efron's question with respect to what's union settlement going to do, so we have 11,000 square feet, and we are going to be providing space for seniors, youth, and young adults. So basically, we already run 4 senior centers pursuant to funding from the Department for the Aging, and we will be providing a senior center in the morning hours. As with many of our current senior centers, the seniors leave around 2:30 or so, and we bring in after-school programming thereafter. We have multiple contracts with the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development for after-school programming. And then after 6 o'clock, when the elementary, middle school kids move on, we're going to have it available for young adults, for youth, teens, et cetera. As we do with all of our community centers, Union Settlement is located. We don't own any property. We're in 8 different NYCHA facilities and in some local schools. We make it available to local community groups, and we plan on doing the same for this space. So we have tenants associations, we have NA and AA groups. We make it available to the extent we can for local residents to utilize. So that is our plan, and we're proud to partner with Mount Sinai and the YMCA on this project. So happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. I actually have a question about your role in the last hearing, only because this is a project where the height is not subject to a height limit and does allow for a really interesting ground floor experience by having the public space in the middle. And that seems like a really positive aspect of the plan put forward by city planning. And I'm wondering if there's any internal inconsistency or reason.
Well, when you look at the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, it had, as everyone said, you don't need to go to the maximum height allowances. And this was put together with plans for 100,000 square feet of community space. There's not that kind of a mandate for the East Harlem as a whole. The city planning proposal left out large swaths of East Harlem, and so we are not able to maximize the mandatory inclusionary housing aspect. So you're losing a lot of availability for affordable housing. So look, East Harlem residents, as a general rule, can't afford affordable housing, and so we need to build as much as possible, and we need to make it have deep affordability as possible. So this project, which is 100% affordable, yes, there's going to be trade-offs, and I think it was Commissioner Cantor who said earlier about those trade-offs. But so this particular project, you're able to achieve 100% affordability. Certainly, there's some at 130, but there's a good percentage at 30%, and there's the community space, and there's the community garden. So I think that. For this particular project, it makes sense, but to simply allow the maximum that city planning proposed and to have the the density and to not utilize the mandatory inclusionary housing availability in the other sections of East Harlem. On balance, I think that was a pretty easy decision. So we stand with the speaker and the borough president and many of the community residents that were here in opposing that. But you know, we're not just knee-jerk. We're going to look at every project on a case-by-case basis, and some are going to meet and some are not. And we're here to give you our view. We've been here since 1895, and we'll look at them as possible. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Other questions?
Okay,
Thank you for the second time, Mr. Nocenti. Our next speaker in support is Limas Albors.
Buenas noches, good evening. My name is Limaris Albors, Vice President for Business Development and Chief of Staff to Raul Rusi, Acacia Network CEO. Here today representing Raul, the Acacia Board, and as a Latina with a strong commitment to preserve the heritage and the culture of our community. I'm also here as part of the development team of Sendero Verde and as a community partner for the project. If Raul were here today, he would begin his testimony by telling all of you that he is un jibarito del barrio de Apiadero, a rural neighborhood in Patillas, Puerto Rico, that is only accessible by foot with no electricity. He will also describe to you the day that he landed in Buffalo and he never moved back to his beloved Apiadero. Raul's story is not different than that of the many Latinos who since the 40s and 50s have made East Harlem their home. He, like many of us, came here mostly for economic reasons, searching for the American dream, and with a conviction that we will go back. Hence, there was no need to invest in a property here. Unfortunately, as many of us know, once you're here, you struggle to make it, to find affordable housing, and provide for our families. Sendero Verde, approximately 650 units of affordable housing, will include community facility, Dream Charter School, YMCA, Monsignor facilities, Union Settlement, and a retail space. This will be located in Park and Madison Avenues, East 111th Street and 112th. These are important sites for our community. Acacia, deep roots in the community, will ensure that the design and the services in this important project reflects the community, rich culture, and enhance the project design to echo and embrace the many elements that have made East Harlem home for many of us. We are working closely with the team, and our ideas have been incorporated, including a space for art and culture. We recommended Gonzalo Cruz, a landscape architect with an understanding of the history and the contributions of the community gardens. He will be an asset to the design team and the community garden. We intend to enhance the workforce development initiatives for this project and work closely with other local organizations. I attend all the development meetings, and I can attest to the team commitments to develop a high-quality, affordable housing project for the community. Every element of the design is carefully assessed. Efficiency and quality are at the top core of the values of the team. It is for this reason that we at Acacia are very pleased to testify in support for Sendero Verde. Acacia, through its affiliates such as East Harlem Council for Community Improvement, the Institute for the Puerto Rican and Hispanic Elderly, and Great Hope, as well as our own affordable housing projects in East Harlem, are deeply rooted in the community.
Thank you very much, and apologies for misreading the handwriting and so mispronouncing your name.
It's okay, Limaris Albors.
Well, any questions for Ms. Albors? Thank you. Our next speaker in support is Emily Parkey. Hello again.
Hello again, everyone. So my name is Emily Parkey. I'm the Director of Family and Community Engagement at DREAM. We're formerly Harlem RBI, and I won't, similar to David, tell you much more about who we are again. What I will tell you is that I started at DREAM Charter School 8 years ago when our school was co-located with PS 38, and have been with the organization long enough to have served in various different shared spaces throughout the years. That is until my organization really recognized the need to find a permanent home that welcomed, celebrated, and inspired our community of scholars and youth. As a result, we partnered with Jonathan Rose Companies to create the East Harlem Center for Living and Learning. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. It is absolutely gorgeous. The biggest complaint for our parents now is that the children don't ever want to leave. So it's impossible to get out of that park until about 7 p.m. We're excited to offer an innovative mixed-use community facility that provides East Harlem families with educational, health, and economic resources to lead empowered lives. Our current project has a school building that inspires learning, 89 units of low-income housing, and again, the amazing public park. Jonathan Rose Company's commitment to the community landscape of East Harlem has been evidenced by their significant financial support, backing, and partnership with us in negotiating and acquiring the development site for our current school, and has really cemented Dream's ability to solidify 25 plus years of work in the community to help children recognize their potential and realize their dreams. One of the most beautiful things about our current project is that one of our current participant, or our former participants who came up through our Little League baseball team, actually now lives right above our executive director's office, and his daughter now attends Dream Charter School. It's that sense of community and support that partners like Jonathan Rose and Companies want to infuse into their work and create a unique and innovative fixture in the community. When Jonathan Rose and Companies approached Dream last year about signing on to the Sendero Verde project on East 111th Street to expand our footprint and services in East Harlem, we very quickly signed on, knowing the transformative power of a renewed partnership. Dream is living, breathing proof that Jonathan Rose Companies is incredibly relentless and creative in creating buildings and spaces that serve, inspire, and motivate communities. Every single child in New York City deserves to go to a school like ours. And they deserve, space tells you a lot about who you are and what you deserve, and the children of East Harlem deserve this building.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Parkey? Vice Chair Knuckles.
Ms. Parkey, are you the principal? What is your role with
I'm the Director of Family and Community Engagement. I serve on the senior leadership team of both the school and the nonprofit.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
And is this a brand new start from scratch high school, or is the high school functioning someplace else now?
No, our high school currently is in its first year, so we have a 9th grade class of 100 students this year. We are in temporary space on 115th Street between Pleasant and First.
So if the development goes fast enough, there might be a graduating class when the new building is open?
Exactly, yeah. So we grow a grade every year. We started with kindergarten and first grade, and every year grow.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker in support is Eileen Bretler.
Hi, my name is Eileen Bretler. I'm a resident of Washington Houses in East Harlem, and I'm a proud parent of Dream Charter School. I'm also a member of DFAC, the school's Family Action Council, where parent voices are heard. My daughter has been in Dream Charter School since kindergarten. I also have 2 godchildren that attend Dream. I'm here to tell you that Dream Charter School is the best thing to come to East Harlem. The staff at Dream is very family-oriented. The principals greet us and our children every morning with handshakes and a smile. I understand that Dream is trying to open a high school in East Harlem, and as a parent of Dream and an East Harlem community member, I think that's a beautiful idea. The school building we have for grades K through 8 is beautiful and a sight to see. My own daughter excelled in Dream Charter School and graduated this summer with high honors. She was accepted into a highly competitive private high school named Spence. I truly love the way that Dream is with their scholars, and I believe that Dream should have a high school built in East Harlem to be able to help more scholars believe in themselves and have the best education they can have. East Harlem needs a great high school, and I say dream with it.
Thank you, Ms. Bretler. Questions? Ms. Levin, would you mind taking questions? Thank you.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. I acknowledge you've been sitting over here for a very long day. Thank you for coming out, because that testimony is very important to us.
And I think many of us noted that it took a bit of self-control for us to sit here, and for your young daughter to sit by patiently is quite a testament to her and to you. Thank you. Okay, we are now going to turn to speakers in opposition to the proposal. Monfazor Rahman. Marina Ortiz. Lynn Lewis. Richse Long. Roger Hernandez. Sophia Weissmauer. Ray Rogers. Justin Wayne. And then we have available, if the commissioners have questions of HPD, Viviana Simmons. It appears not. I'll note that the record on this matter is going to remain open for 10 days to receive comments on the draft environmental impact statement. That is through Tuesday, the 5th of September. And with that, the hearing is closed. And Madam Secretary, if I may again have the pleasure of addressing you as Madam Secretary, are there additional items before this commission?
No, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask if there were others present in the audience who would want to be heard. You're very welcome if you would like to, sir. Oh, okay. And thank you for catching my mistake. So again, Madam Secretary, other items?
No, Madam Chair.
Music to our ears. This hearing is closed. Thank you. And thank you to all of the commissioners.
Thank you, Madam Chair.